When voters complain about Democrats, and they do so sometimes more than they do Republicans running the federal government and a lot of states as well.
I asked the audience, who here thinks that Chuck Schumer is doing a good job as the leader? 350 people, not a single hand went up.
They're sometimes met with suggestions that taking substantive and non-performative action when you don't have any real power just isn't possible.
They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government.
So people say, what do you want them to do?
What leverage do we have?
The general response that I've seen is that people want the Democrats to act like an opposition party.
The other thing that I think really jumped out in our NBC poll that took a hit during this shutdown was the Republicans standing in the generic congressional ballot. Suddenly, Democrats in our poll had opened up an 8-point advantage over Republicans. Again, when we had checked in earlier in the year, this number was basically dead even.
And actions outside the halls of electoral power are possible.
It's good to be home. Now we need to end the illegal abduction of Kilmar Abigail Garcia and bring him home, too.
On Friday, I wrote in Degenerate Art about some of the Democrats who have been acting like an opposition party. I mentioned New Jersey Senator Andy Kim.
Delaney Hall is not just some one single bad apple. You know, this is a systemic failure.
And Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost.
We can't allow this place to shut down and then just forget about it.
As examples of leadership on the ground from officials in office.
I rise today to share stories that I've heard from detainees and families at Delaney Hall, and to tell you why these stories should be a call to action to ground our immigration policies in humanity.
The former met with families inside Delaney Hall detention facility in Newark.
I had a man show me a container of milk that was curdled solid because it was clearly not stored properly.
And was tear gassed trying to protect the crowd of demonstrators as he emerged.
My throat was burning. It was something that was really painful to watch. I mean, Chris, I'll tell you, like, I have to say that the ease with which it seems like violence is emerging in our streets in America, we cannot normalize this. Violence in America, it should not be easy. It should not be inevitable.
The latter has gone repeatedly to the Everglades concentration camp called Alligator Alcatraz by the White House.
Detainees are exposed to the heat, wildlife, mosquitoes that can potentially carry disease, stripped of their civil rights, and as of this past Saturday, cut off from legal counsel.
To assess changing conditions of confinement there.
This was an embarrassing and tragic experiment in the suffering of people.
But today I'm going to do the opposite of that praise session.
So many of our elected leaders have failed us that this American tragedy can only be stopped by the American people, you.
I'm going to address recent actions by political leaders that show a real failure to meet the moment.
Governor Whitmer also in attendance. The barn, as this data center campus is called, will be full of servers and hard drives. And the big concern from the community has long been water consumption.
Are there Republican officials that show a real failure to meet the moment as well?
Will you implement court orders when they tell you to stop?
Absolutely, yes.
You're making an assumption on court orders I haven't seen.
Or will you not?
I am going to enforce the law.
The cowardice and corruption of Republican leaders is in almost every case worse than that of any individual elected Democratic official right now.
For example, in President Trump's refugee policies, one of our most successful immigration programs by far has been the admission of Afrikaner refugees.
But that said, the Democrats need to be doing more.
The Senate passed a 45-day extension of one of the most sweeping surveillance powers in American law under the pretext that Congress will use the time to negotiate some real reforms. Don't let that fool you. This is just the latest chapter in a long bipartisan habit of treating warrantless access to your private communications as a feature of the law, not a bug.
And all this matters not only in the everyday sense of politicians who should be mindful of their political power and how they use it. Typically, in concentration camp societies, legislators have been sidelined by authoritarian governments that manage to disempower or corrupt the opposition. Governors or their equivalents have also been removed or replaced. So, are Democratic electeds currently doing some good things for constituents this very moment?
Kids have one extra reason to celebrate. Today, our Mayor Mamdani repealed bedtime on days the Knicks play in the finals.
Yes, usually, sometimes. But simultaneously, many Democratic politicians seem to see themselves as referees.
You can't come up with ideas in our wonderful friends in California and New York and expect that it's going to work in a place like Idaho or Michigan.
They're doing as much or more to counter the Democrats who elected them as they are to push back against an administration that is actively dismantling democracy itself.
The big headline is that Marco Rubio has been confirmed as Secretary of State, and not only confirmed, but confirmed unanimously and in a bipartisan vote. 99-0 was the final tally.
Others are embracing criminality or corruption, doing the work of the White House to further destroy the country.
The crypto industry just notched a major win with the Senate Banking Committee going ahead and advancing a rules of the road crypto bill that has really been the industry's #1 priority. They did it with all Republican support. 2 Democrats did join.
Today, I'll give you some examples and explain why they're a serious problem. I won't pretend that elected officials don't have a challenge. They do have to actually meet with their opponents and debate or vote on bills of shared interest. They have to actually conduct the everyday business of government, while also trying to make a difference outside the halls of power that they don't currently control. But in my opinion, the fact that they spend time with these political opponents as peers conducting business means they actually have a greater obligation to show themselves as the opposition in the halls of power and in other settings as often as they can.
There is no one coming to save us. We've got to do it ourselves.
Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, has come in for the lion's share of criticism for years.
350 people, not a single hand went up.
And there's no doubt that he's put in a difficult position by having multiple roles to play.
Any minute now, the Israeli forces could raid this community and forcibly evict its residents.
Because of the sense that he is beholden to high office and is more interested in the trappings of power than in helping his constituents.
They're responding to an order by the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who said that he signed an order to displace this community.
But this week, he solidly earned the condemnation he's received by walking in the Israel Day parade in New York City.
It may look peaceful now. A 10-year-old Palestinian Hussein Jahalin tells us how Israeli settlers raid the village at night, steal their sheep, and intimidate them.
Attending the parade meant appearing with far-right Israeli political figures, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, a man who has threatened to evict the residents of a Palestinian and Bedouin village in the West Bank if the International Criminal Court issues an arrest warrant for him.
The Israeli government has advanced its so-called E1 plan. It stands for East 1 and aims to connect the illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank with Israeli-annexed occupied East Jerusalem.
As Haaretz has noted, Smotrich has made calls for genocide.
Some of Israel's closest allies have condemned comments made by Minister Bezalel Smotrich about letting 2 million Palestinians die of hunger.
Along with Schumer, New York Governor Kathy Hochul and New York State Attorney General Tish James also attended that parade.
Smotrich claimed that it might be justified, it might be moral, to let them starve.
This was not some official delegation negotiating Israeli policy or addressing the war in Iran or recent atrocities in the West Bank or Gaza.
International pressure and media attention have saved the community from previous evictions, but people here say Israel is more emboldened now and fear that the eviction is more imminent.
A man promoting a genocide, wanted for it potentially in the not distant future, was accompanied by the leader of the Democrats in the United States Senate for no higher moral purpose than a photo opportunity. And meanwhile, back in my home state,
let's just get it out of the way.
Governor Abigail Spanberger has been quietly doing something worse than morally compromised photo opportunities.
Union leaders in the Commonwealth are not happy with your veto of collective bargaining legislation that would allow public workers to form unions and do all the things that unions do for workers.
She has been using her office to limit the ability of representatives in her state to take action.
Why did you do that after expressing support for such legislation during your campaign?
In less than 6 months as governor, Spanberger has vetoed some 40 bills passed by members of her own party, members elected last November by the people to take action.
So I continue to support public sector collective bargaining, and I continue to look forward to a place where we'll have a bill that I'll sign into law.
rather than trying to do after-action shaping and signing the bills as a goodwill measure, supporting the power of her party to make change in this state. She insisted instead on getting amendments up front and vetoing legislation if she doesn't get exactly her way. She has limited the attempt to end a tax exemption for data centers and to do something else with the money that had been allocated for that.
Voters may not necessarily want a data center, but they certainly want the iPhone with the data on it in their pocket. Which I say not to be kind of sassy and disrespectful, but because it's actually true.
She's pushed back on collective bargaining rights of public workers.
Governor, given everything that you just said, paid family medical leave, raise the minimum wage, laws on wage theft, why do you think there are folks in the labor movement who say that your veto was a, quote, betrayal, as I saw in one of the stories?
I would defer to them to answer that question.
These are just two examples of the bills she's torpedoed that will have long-term effects on democracy in a broader context, while also affecting the quality of life for everyday Virginians.
I asked WDBJ political expert Casey Myers if he thinks Spanberger's vetoes against initiatives from her own party will hurt Democrats running for Congress and in local races this fall.
Using some foggy notion of centrism does two things.
One of the issues that it does raise is, how effective are you as a party to get your initiatives through?
It treats the current political setting as normal. It also prevents the rise of meaningful multi-state opposition to the Trump administration outside the halls of Congress, where Democrats are severely limited in what they can accomplish.
And that could not necessarily sour people on candidates, but it could end up making people less enthusiastic in terms of their own turnout.
So if what being a centrist really means is you cannot actually make any significant changes for the better, yet your opponents will come in and change things for the worst, then it only becomes possible to make the system worse and worse over time. There is no way to undo the harm that's been done. And at root, that is the problem with all these approaches.
Not a single hand went up.
Spanberger needs to lead, but she's actually putting the brakes on her own party's attempt to expand its power and set policy and offer Virginians a different vision of what the state can be. It's a misplaced kind of centrism that actually impedes leadership because it kneecaps those who are trying to oppose the dismantling of democracy. And it will not help her with those on the right if she's hoping to aspire to a bigger office later, because the right-wing information sphere has already tarred her as an extremist.
This feels like a power grab. It feels like it's off base for their lives, and it feels like she lied to them because she did.
In a more concrete example of harm, Colorado Governor Jared Polis actually collaborated with the Trump administration's agenda in dismantling any accountability for trying to overthrow the government.
Peters was sentenced to 9 years after prosecutors proved she gave an unauthorized person access to Mesa County election equipment in the aftermath of the 2020 election, then helped spread false claims that the vote was stolen.
Polis has previously drawn criticism for actions that went against democratic principles, including a recent veto of a bill that would make it easier for Colorado unions to organize.
Her case became a cause célèbre on the right, with President Trump repeatedly calling her a, quote, political prisoner and demanding that Colorado set her free.
But on Monday, as a result of a decision he had announced earlier, Colorado election clerk Tina Peters was released from prison after serving only a quarter or so of her sentence.
The move comes after months of pressure from Trump, who cast Peters as a martyr in this broader campaign to rewrite the history of the 2020 election.
Peters launched her post-prison media tour immediately by making a series of unrepentant statements.
Joining us now, Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold.
She spoke with authoritarian, racist, xenophobe Steve Bannon and told him that elections are rigged. And she claimed that telling the truth about the 2020 election conspiracy is why she was in prison.
I do think it will embolden the election denialism movement in this country at a time that is quite dangerous with our upcoming elections.
To the credit of Colorado's Democratic Party, they formally censured Polis for commuting Peters' sentence and even imposed some punishment.
Since the big lie emerged, just the workload has been tremendously high and the threat environment is real. we've actually had a near 40% turnover in elected county clerks in Colorado since 2020, in a big part because of the threat environment.
But there can be no undoing of that particular harm.
Look, I know it's really tough to have federal aid cut, big institutions moved out of the state of Colorado, literally over retribution over Tina Peters. But again, if we placate this lawless president who tries to bully his way into getting people to follow his lawless orders, democracy can fall.
Last week, I wrote about Delaney Hall, a federal ICE detention facility in Newark run by the private contractor Geo Group.
In this Trump economy right now, you know, the only boom industry is private prisons.
Conditions inside are so horrific that detainees are holding a hunger strike.
This is happening now.
Protesters are trying to support those inside by showing up and maintaining a presence outside Delaney Hall.
Moira Donegan encapsulated the best of what we do know. The food is spoiled and sometimes has maggots. Those who are in prison there, who have not been convicted of any crime, are forced to work for about $1 a day. Conditions are overcrowded and unsanitary. There is only limited and inadequate medical care. Those inside say they're being beaten and pepper sprayed.
As I wrote then, New Jersey Governor Mikie Sherrill last week had demanded access to the facility and called for it to be closed down.
Where our own governor has been refused access to meet with detainees about the conditions there.
But recent days have seen the New Jersey State Police deployed on multiple nights against the demonstrators.
Protesters and organizers continued to gather near the massive jail over the weekend after New Jersey State Police imposed a barricade about a half-mile long around Delaney's Hall perimeter.
There are several reports and even some video of projectiles striking demonstrators and of beatings.
Activists denounced New Jersey Governor Mikie Sherrill for deploying state police with officers in riot gear reportedly beating up protesters.
The Trump administration has praised the state police as committing an operation in support of ICE and DHS's agenda.
We're joined by Bob Hennelly. He's the award-winning investigative journalist and has been covering the protests at Delaney Hall.
Any governor or elected official who does not understand that what is undergirding every crisis in the country right now is police state power applied by corrupt authorities against vulnerable and selectively targeted communities is failing their job.
The police violence, which of course the likes of the New York Post, that's what they want, takes us off the heroism of the detainees who have written these 3 letters where they've written something that I think that historians will say is equivalent to the Declaration of Independence because they so vividly describe the way they've been deprived of all the basic human rights that we come to associate with this nation.
Abetting those gross abuses of power is disastrous.
We have a period of lawlessness in this country where the Trump administration is just systematically ignoring writ of habeas corpuses that have been issued by Article 3 courts.
Preemptively using state police to do the job so that federal authorities won't come in to take action instead is the worst kind of collaboration.
I just think it's also foreseeable. You do know, because you covered it when it happened, back in May of 2025, Mayor Baraka was taken off the street by masked federal agents.
One that spares the Trump administration the risk of having to actually take action itself.
This is Sally Pillay, a mutual aid advocate with Eyes on ICE New Jersey. She described the chaotic scene as state police swarmed the protest outside Delaney Hall Saturday night.
And one that tarnishes the good faith the governor had built through prior words and deeds.
There was no announcement. There was nothing. It just came. There was an escalation of police with shields, mounted horses, flashbangs, tear gas, smoke bombs. That was just one after the other, one after the other.
Monday, Will Bunch of the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote about the presence of the New Jersey State Police outside Delaney Hall. He asked an important question. Is the New Jersey governor at war with the rogue agency that sends masked goon squads into city streets to grab day laborers or Uber drivers and warehouses them in squalid gulags, and that murdered 2 citizens on the streets of Minneapolis when they tried to protest? Or is she partnering with them? I discovered Will's piece halfway through working on this episode, but I'm not surprised that he beat me to the punch with a similar perspective. I think that there's a kind of compartmentalization of effect in which Democratic politicians don't understand the degree to which they're part of a larger fight against authoritarianism. And they don't seem to realize that this fight connects directly to their state or district while also giving them a role far beyond their immediate responsibilities and their limited official role. Free speech is being boxed in on every front. To actively limit it yourself in an attempt to appear neutral or to appease the right's hunger for punishment of those standing up for immigrants and other communities is to disempower everyone who is working against the harm that the White House is imposing right now. It disempowers the other politicians actively trying to fight it as well, and it harms the prospects for democracy for everyone going forward. Even in posts that are mostly criticism, I want to offer counterexamples. So I'll include praise for the actions that Newark Mayor Russ Baraka has taken so far this week, even as Governor Sherrill has been falling short.
Mayor Baraka, thank you so much for being here.
Next week, he may be the one that's falling short, but for now, he's saying what needs to be said and taking constructive action.
You say you believe that ICE has been escalating the situation. How so?
Since state health inspectors haven't been allowed inside Delaney Hall, Newark officials filed a lawsuit to demand access.
The allegations, once again, are serious. They include inadequate medical care and also psychological abuse.
Mayor Baraka also spoke out earlier this week to remind the public that people have been protesting at Delaney Hall for nearly a year, and it's only the presence and actions of ICE and, more recently, the New Jersey State Police outside the facility that have led to violence.
There were only 2 times that they actually got violent. Is the first time when I was there and was arrested. That's when ICE was there, and they became very violent, not just towards me, towards protesters, toward the congressional delegation.
And replacing the New Jersey State Police with Newark officers instead.
Last night it was pretty good. Newark had taken over at that point, and we had no incidents, no arrests.
One issue that the mayor has been emphasizing is that Delaney Hall is privately run and doesn't sit on federal land. Therefore, those who run it are subject to state and municipal laws.
And the congressional delegation is doing their job, just responding to their constituents who are concerned about the behavior and what's going on inside of this building. And they have a right to investigate it.
They cannot be shielded by a contract that they have with Homeland Security, which is what they're trying to do over and over again. Baraka himself offered some criticism of the governor, saying, Mikie Sherrill was supposed to take action. She's the governor of New Jersey. She made a decision to involve the state police. I disagree with the tactics that they employed. If you use a sword, you have to expect people to get cut.
The people who are making the complaints are the detainees themselves, and the representatives are doing their job to investigate the complaints that are made by detainees.
I'd like to take a minute as well to praise Representative LaMonica McIver.
Secretary Mullen, have you ever had a visit to Delaney Hall for an oversight visit?
No, I have not.
Thank you.
Charged with assault last year over her appearance at Delaney Hall.
I'm being charged for doing my job, and I continue to, express my innocence to this case, and I'm going to continue to do my job for the people of New Jersey.
McIver won her primary challenge this week, and right now she is scheduled to go before a federal appeals court later this month as she tries to get the assault charge thrown out before trial.
So we look forward to June 23rd when we're in front of the appellate court arguing to have this case dismissed.
She has continued to show up at Delaney Hall.
These charges aren't going to stop me from having oversight or continuing to show up at Delaney Hall to make sure that I'm holding these individuals in this administration accountable.
Pulling back for a moment to consider all this from 30,000 feet.
The European Union has given its green light for the creation of detentions outside of Europe to where they will send illegal migrants.
It's worth remembering that this sequence of events isn't just how it's going today, right now in the United States.
Basically, under the agreement concluded, countries like Germany, Austria, and Denmark could see the construction of these detention hubs in countries like Rwanda, Uganda, or Uzbekistan.
This is happening all over the world and has happened for more than a century.
Spain has been one of the biggest critics of these new rules, saying that it does not respect human rights.
See, for instance, already bad and rapidly deteriorating immigration policies in Europe.
The Washington Post here says the EU is adopting strict new measures and moving to, quote, deploy some of the clenched fist tactics used by the Trump administration.
In the history of authoritarianism, strongmen have counted on bureaucrats and politicians to continue like marionettes in their traditional roles, while those with power kill every freedom in society. This is why legislators are rarely the ones who push back on authoritarianism.
Former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been sentenced to life in prison for his brief imposition of martial law in December 2024.
And the recent example of South Korea was so extraordinary because it was unusual.
Yoon defended his martial law decree as necessary to stop liberals, whom he described as anti-state forces, from obstructing his agenda with their legislative majority.
Opposition politicians must be mindful of the fact that their role is in part to preserve the ability to stand meaningfully, dramatically, and publicly against the government, even if it draws fire. In some cases, because it will draw fire.
The decree lasted about 6 hours before being lifted after lawmakers managed to break through a military blockade and voted unanimously to lift the measure.
And I do want to take a minute to praise those who show up day after day and night after night at places like Broadview and Delaney Hall.
A group of seniors traveling from New York City to Newark Wednesday afternoon with a message.
That is one path to action, and it's a powerful one that sets an example and serves as a check on state power in a really explicit way.
We need to support the hunger strikers and the labor strikers.
For those who aren't ready or able to protest in that particular way for various reasons, supporting those who do, raising the profile of the hunger strikers and the conditions in ICE facility, these things are also critical.
New Yorkers should care about this. We think we should, and we do, and we're showing that. We're here for them.
There is long-term awareness that needs to be expanded about the ways that conditions in these facilities mimic and even directly replicate conditions in prisons in the United States today. Demanding better from the Republican politicians backing the current authoritarianism underway and from the Democratic politicians who oppose it is key. In a discussion group with 30 or so high schoolers at a New York public school last week, I was so impressed by the way several of them have approached fighting for the rights of immigrants on multiple levels. They were out demonstrating. Several had been doing community organizing with Know Your Rights pamphlets. A few had even joined with kids from other schools, going to Albany to lobby dozens of legislators. Their commitment at such a young age, with less institutional power and fewer resources than almost anyone watching this episode, was so inspiring to me. There is so much to do, but there is also so much we can do.
Thanks for listening to Next Comes What. Please share this with one person who's looking for ways to survive this mess. To support this podcast, please become a paid subscriber at AndreaPitzer.com and consider giving Next Comes What a 5-star review where you get your podcasts.
And that's it.